Hello, I'm Nancy Perlman, here in the southern part of Turkey on the Mediterranean Sea. On this edition of Eco News, we visit ancient 2,000-year-old ruins of the Greek and Roman period and even earlier cultures. Along the coast are modern beach resorts. We hike in the forested mountains and see the nomadic lifestyle of the local people. Stay with us for an exciting adventure along the Lycian Way.
Hello, I'm Lycian. I'm a licensed tourist guide working for the Ministry of Culture of Tourism of Republic of Turkey. Now we're in the eastern part of the city of Antalya at the Karpuz Kaldıran waterfall. Antalya became a popular resort town after 1980s, and now its population reached over 1 million. And the eastern part of the city has a very nice cliff that runs about 10 miles along the city, with beautiful parks, jogging places, places for bicycle. One can uninterruptedly bike or jog or run for 10 miles. And in the middle of this journey, you encounter this beautiful Karpuz Kaldıran waterfall. About 20 years ago, while we were doing the regular bus tours all around Turkey to Cappadocia, Ephesus and so forth, we, as an archaeologist, I also participated in a survey project, especially in the Taurus Mountains, trying to identify unknown or not listed archaeological sites and settlements. We spent about 10 years in the mountains. Then we thought it would be a good idea to take people to these rural areas after we founded Equinox Travel. With 4x4 vehicles, we started doing multi-day 4x4 excursions to these mountains to see these ancient sites and ancient monuments, as well as the nomadic areas. So far, we are the only company in Turkey doing this multi-day trips, and doing this over 20 years now. We have routes all over Turkey in almost all the Taurus Mountains and the Black Sea Mountains, the Central Anatolian Mountains. We have traveling with our 4x4 vehicles to these beautiful sites. We continue our expedition in the Taurus Mountains. We are now in the Bey Dağları, the Prince Mountains region, and we're about 6,000 feet high now. We're going to go up to almost 9,000 feet high. On the way, we have seen these wooden storehouses, which are really interesting. They still stand as a reminder how ancient architecture for thousands of years can still be used. These were used to store grain and corn and barley, the local products. Of course, now they have electric cold rooms. These are made out of cedar woods, which we see plenty in this area. And actually, they are not nailed, but they are inserted to each other. But what is more interesting about these wooden storehouses, rock-cut tombs from 500 BC of the Lycians, which the Lycians actually copied after wooden houses. And these wooden storehouses are identical copies of these rock-cut tombs, which were copied from the Lycian houses, which shows us that over 3,000 years, this wooden architecture is still being used in this area. In a little further, we are going to see some beehives, which are also copied from the ancient Lycian tombs, which we will see in their capital city of Santos.
The beautiful cedar forests here are stunning. The old growth trees are hundreds of years old, and fortunately, they are being preserved.
Now we are heading through Tahtalıdağ, the wooden mountain, which is the highest peak along the coastline, going over 9,000 feet high. This area we see dense cedar forests. These are the Taurus cedar, or known better in the world as the cedars of Lebanon. The first temple dedicated to Solomon was built out of cedar, according to we hear. And unfortunately, because they are very valuable trees, commercially valuable trees, they have been cut down all over in the Mediterranean countries, including Lebanon. And today only Turkey holds natural cedar forests in the world. And we are traveling in Lycia. Partly the wealth of the Lycians were also coming from these cedar forests that actually covered their entire territory. This is a very valuable tree because it grows very slow, and just like any slow growing tree, when you freshly cut it, it's very easy to work on it. It's very soft. But once it dries, it gets like concrete. It doesn't move, it doesn't expand, it doesn't shrink. So when you make a boat, a wheel, a door frame, window frame, a wooden floor, a ceiling, doesn't matter, whatever you made out of cedar, it is very durable, just like the wooden storehouses they make. They also have a very distinctive odor, smell. A very black juice comes out of the cedar, and this smell actually keeps all the insects, bugs, scorpions, and snakes away. So the nomads actually use this juice putting around their tents, and people now, even today, they put cedar juice around their houses. When you make your dowry chest out of cedar and put your clothes, it can survive for decades. Bugs, insects don't get into it. And the cedars today in Turkey, 90% under preservation. There are very few commercial cedar forests growing. As I said, about 90% of our cedar forests are now under preservation. Just a small note that these cedars, the Taurus cedars or cedars of Lebanon, are different from the cedars that you see in North America. People always ask about who are Turks, what's a Turk, and we explain them that the Turks came to Anatolia from Central Asia, what today is known as Azerbaijan or Uzbekistan or Turkmenistan. They were living originally in the steppes of Central Asia, and from the 7th century AD onwards, they start moving into Anatolia with small groups, and eventually in the 11th century, with one of the big empires, Seljuk Empire, they were able to defeat the Byzantine, the Eastern Roman Empire, and came to Turkey. And these Turks originally were herding goats, and they were nomads, which actually gave them very good advantage of knowing all the routes and trails, and they were moving fast. They were very good horseback riders. And these nomadic people who came into Anatolia mostly settled in the mountains because that's what they need. And for centuries, they have been herding their goats, going down to lower valleys in the wintertime and moving up to these high summer resorts, which they call yayla, and spending the summers in the higher resorts. Now, of course, with opening of the roads and with the new technology and modern life, most people, even if they are coming from nomadic heritage, they don't prefer to run after the goats, but they prefer to get decent jobs in the cities. So still there are few nomads left, especially in the eastern Taurus mountains. There are still nomadic tribes who don't have permanent housing. They still go with camels and mules and horses from place to place, but the number of these people are diminishing. But if somebody asks who's a real Turk, ethnically, the nomads, or as we call the Yörük or the Turkmen, are still the people who are carrying out the tradition of Turkish lifestyle from Central Asia for over 1,000 years. Lycia is also one of the remote areas in Turkey with several national parks and wildlife preserved areas. This area is also welcoming people with its wild flora and fauna. In the winter and especially in the spring, you will see thousands of wildflowers. We know that about 30% of the endemic wildflowers of all Europe are in this area in Lycia. You are likely to encounter during these hikes a fox, a rabbit, maybe a wild boar, maybe if you're lucky, an ibex, which is a wild goat, even a deer along these trails. This part of the Lycian Trail, which covers the Maden base, actually the name comes from Maden means mining, because these areas contain chromium, and since the 19th century it was mined. Not anymore, now it's a national park, so the name Maden comes from mining, and it follows pretty much the coastline with little bit ups and downs, going up to 300-400 feet back to the sea level, 200 feet back to the sea level. It doesn't get that high from the big Maden until we get to Çıralı. So geographically we have here almost 18,000 feet of a huge gorge, which half of it is in the water.
Our next journey is on this boat, where we're going to go along the coast to see the beaches, the mountains from the sea.
This beautiful location, or the beach of Olympus and the ancient ruins, also offer you a wonderful holiday experience with beautiful weather almost year-round. The summers can be a little hot, but the winters, the spring and the autumns are just breathtaking. You can swim throughout the year, even on New Year's Eve on this beach.
In the village of Çıralı, we can walk along the beach and discover medieval walls. But behind them are the ancient ruins of Olympus, dating back over 2,000 years. We near the town of Olympus on a hill called Chimera, where we see flames coming out of the rocks. There are many myths and legends about these flames. One is that the eternal flame for the Olympic Games started right here.
Behind me are some moving leaves and some people working. There is cleaning and excavations going on right here where we are. We're standing in front of the gate of a temple that is thought to have been dedicated to Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor of the 2nd century AD. The assumption is due to an inscription that was found in front of the entrance gate. The inscription mentions Marcus Aurelius, and more than likely this was a temple dedicated to him. But it's also likely that the temple was never finished completely because there are some decorative features were left unfinished. And today, to the right and left of it, there are later walls dating to the 5th, 6th and 7th centuries AD. And these walls are assumed to have belonged to a monastery that was in connection with the grand church standing right beside the temple of Marcus Aurelius. There are archaeologists from the university, from various other universities, and the main work, the bulk of the work, is also, of course, as always, being done by the local people, the workmen.
In the Taurus Mountains and Beydağları, the Prince Mountains region, here we are in these high nomadic resorts where the nomads come to spend their summertime with their herds. But in this area we see something very different and unique that you cannot see elsewhere in the world. If you don't have someone who knows what they are, even if you do and they tell you that these are beehives, at first people, react because nobody's seen beehives in this form. But in this area, in the 18th, 19th century, perhaps even older, but we don't have the older examples, there are these monumental beehives built on a prismal body, and at the top there is a platform with a triangular roof, and the old round wooden hives are installed into it to obtain honey. Of course, the function can be easily understood that these are to avoid the bear, which is very few now but used to be abundant in this area, to get to the honey and eat the honey. The bear and the beehive has an interesting story, because if you have honey filled in the hives, it's not a problem because the bear will come and eat one or two and go. But the problem is when you don't have any honey in the beehive, that makes the bear angry, and he just eventually destroys and breaks each and every hive which is empty. So this is why they use these monumental structures. But the interesting part of this again is the roots of this architecture is going back to the Lycian times, at least 2,600 years, where we see beautiful examples in Lycia, especially in Xanthos, the monumental tombs that were built for Lycian kings and heroes, and this is an identical architecture still being used and copied continuously in the region for more than 2,500 years now. We are about 8,000 feet high. There are only few of these left, and most of them are in the high mountains. This area, which is called Bereköy area, there are 5 of them, and very recently we were able to register these in the government as a cultural heritage. So now nobody can knock these down, and as long as they will survive, they will continue be staying here.
We're on our way to Cape Galedonia to take a hike through the beautiful pine forest with incredible views of the Mediterranean wild coastline. We've been hiking along a nice, well-maintained, easy trail through the pine forest to get to the top of the hill. And there is the lighthouse, built in 1936. Along the coastline are beaches and harbors for boats and ships. But yet, some of the areas are rocky and cliff-like, and they need that warning from the lighthouse.
The ancient name of this area was Helidonia, which meant, in ancient Greek, the shallows. The same name was also used for those beautiful 5 islands standing right in front of this beautiful cape, Cape Gelidonia. This region is actually at the very southeastern corner of the Lycian Peninsula that today in Turkish geography is known as the Teke Peninsula. And this is also interesting because there are counter currents right here and counter winds that make it very difficult for seamen who don't know their seas very well. Sudden winds can throw them towards the rocks, and that is why the oldest, earliest known shipwreck to our day is found right here in Cape Gelidonia, together with a slightly older one a bit further ahead on the Uluburun Cape, known also as the Great Cape. As much as this part of the Lycian coast was dangerous for the ancient sailors, it was at the same time the crossroads of ancient trade. According to the information we have today, the Lycian coast is one of the oldest sailing routes of the world, and the oldest shipwrecks known to our day were found right here in Gelidonia and Uluburun.
Behind me we see an agora. Everybody knows what an agora is, well, more or less. Our word gathering actually comes from agora, is the gathering place of the city. Agora is not necessarily the marketplace, it's the living heart of the city. In some cities you have an agora, but you don't have any shops or any vendors or any tents, because only official meetings or receptions are held there. In this case we call this a state agora. An agora for the state affairs, and Arikanda, surprisingly located up in the mountain, had a civil agora, like we know, as well as a state agora for official state receptions and meetings.
We're in the town square of Demre, and behind me you can see the statue, which is a new interpretation of Santa Claus and Saint Nicholas put together.
We're in the Kakova region, and we're going to take a hike up the hill to the Semina Castle, which has been in continuous use from the 5th century BCE to the 19th century.
The castle is actually rather small, but it has a beautiful lookout, and that's why it's a very strategic and important point to have a castle in. It sees the 3 entrances into this harbor, where actually the most important village of today takes its name from, Uchos. Its ancient name, Teomusa, also meant 3 mouths, 3 entrances into the harbor. One interesting feature inside this castle is a beautiful but tiny little Roman period theater that could hold around 300 people.
I've had a fantastic visit here on the Lycian Way in the southern part of Turkey. The hiking in the old-growth cedar and pine forests, the boat trips on the Mediterranean Sea, and the 4x4 drives in the Taurus Mountains have been wonderful. It has been great getting close to the roots of Western civilization at the ancient ruins. The friendly Turkish hospitality and delicious food in this modern country adds to the fun adventures. On behalf of my nonprofit organization, Educational Communications and Eco News, I'm Nancy Perlman, wishing you a natural, unspoiled environment.
Yılan You can't start.